So we are a work podcast. So we talk about work. That's primarily our focus. So you talked about AI is somewhat it is a way to outsource. Like it's one of the way to you're
Mhm.
outsourcing your sort of your some of your pain points. So and there's a stigma attached to AI, or whether you call it outsourcing, is people, like so losing people and using AI to
Mhm.
technology. What is your take? What is your take on the work side of situation? Like, so people who are basically paranoid with this idea of, hey, maybe AI is taking away my job. What would you
Mm.
say to those worried folks?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways to talk through this, but taking the historical perspective is really important, and stepping back a bit, and realizing that, look, every time we thought technology was going to take something away, it didn't. It created more. Quality of life and employment is better than it was before we had a lot of modern technologies. We have been using technology since the beginning of time, at least beginning of time as Homo sapiens have experienced it, as humans have experienced it. So, it's just not the case that technology is bad. Technology is just a lever. It's a tool that gives us leverage so that we get more from less. We get more from our physical environment by being able to catch things that are out of our physical reach, or lift things that are beyond our muscular capacity, or our own strength. It gives us intellectual reach, allows us to think and calculate in a way where we couldn't. And what AI does, it gives us temporal leverage, that is, allows us to see a little bit ahead in time so that we can make better decisions today. So the reality is we've been using tools to get these types of leverage, physical and intellectual and now temporal leverage, forever. And we've benefited a lot from that. We've been able to eat more by doing less hunting, and produce more by using more machines. So it's always been the case. Secondly, it just doesn't bear out in the data. As the adoption of AI increases, it's still very much going through its big initial phase of adoption, but you don't see jobs disappear. And then thirdly, and more constructively, you can think of all the new jobs that are being created, the different roles that exist in companies that manage large amounts of data and build predictive models that didn't exist before, or that don't exist in other companies.
I think one thing I was thinking about. So I was reading the history of if automotive, and there was a sort of one of the early advertising against the idea of car. So the first car used to use a lot of lumber, and people sort of was freaking
Mm.
out that the car uses slightly more lumber than what a typical household during that time was requiring. So they were panicking that the world would be out of lumber and will be living in caves. And now one of the palladium, which is a very small element, is $1 billion industry in itself that's used in car as one of the converters. So but I think that the situation now, which even from our vantage point, we are sort of even ourselves seeing the anxiety justified, is that the speed of change has increased, right, beyond human capability. So in
Hmm.
earlier cases, definitely there's a small belt, they'll suffer, probably they'll get to this new wave, they'll find better paying jobs, better paying economic opportunities and role. But nowadays, it's all across, right? So the span is shrinking. So when you look at the situation now, and the speed of transformation, speed of digitalization, speed of AI, and humans are lateral when it comes to our way to retrain and re-equip ourselves, right? Some of us are blessed that we are slightly more inclined to technology, but many of us are not that blessed, where we are not very close, our job is not very close to technology. So from your vantage point, what do you see as uh, some of the next few steps in the work side of the community, so they can sort of get on the positive side of AI rather than the negative side?
And so, do you mean there, like, what can people do to train themselves up for this next era? Is that right?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really just starts with numeracy, getting as numerate as possible, especially learning as many statistical methods as possible, because that's what we've got now. We've got more data available about what's going on in our world, structured data from sensors, from phones, cameras, microphones, etc., from things going into databases, the exhaust of all the software that we use, the data exhaust, so to speak. So we've got more data, and we can use that data to generate information. We can process it and figure out, this is something that can inform our understanding of a situation, of who our customers are, of what the demand pattern for this, sweater or this type of clothing is. Or this type of food, for how this medicine is produced, for how this disease manifests itself in the human body. We've got more data about that, and we can process it to get some information about some of these fundamental things that are happening in the world. And then from that information, we can learn. We can learn really how it's happening. And once you learn, then you can make a prediction, see if it plays out, and then learn from the result. And so really that's what we do all day long with our brains. We're predictive machines, but it's what we can now do on a computational substrate, on computers. And so it all starts with being numerate. It all starts with understanding statistics so that you can work with data. So that's one thing. But, it doesn't have to be all about mathematics and statistics and whatnot. There's a lot around telling stories with data that's really useful these days. There's a lot around just understanding the biology of other beings, whether it's animals or humans or whatnot, and how they learn, and then maybe, trying to transfer that onto a computer one day. And that's coming at it from the biological perspective rather than the mathematical. There are lots of ways you can learn this sort of stuff. You can learn it in the field of economics with econometrics, with geology, geostatistics, biostatistics. There are lots of ways you can come at this, but AI is not this whole separate field that people think about. It's actually a combination of lots of fields, and you can come at it in lots of different ways. And I've got a whole reading list on my website that tries to give people a way to approach the field, no matter what their existing interests are, whether you're interested in markets or economics, whether you're interested in science, or whether you're interested in computers, of course. So there are lots of ways you can approach this, and there are lots of ways you can learn. You can just read around the area, you can brush up on statistics, or you can take one of the many courses out there in machine learning that are really good.